Welcome to Lab 5. In this lab, we're going to explore the absorption of gamma rays by various materials such as aluminum and lead and water. We will look at water because water is used to store radioactive waste from power plants. The used fuel is stored in 40 feet of water, and we want to understand the absorption properties of water for that purpose. The lab itself will be very similar to what you've done in the past, so it should be straightforward. We will use a cesium-137 source, and we will explore the absorption in something like aluminum. Now, the first thing we have to understand is that you need to know what the total thickness of the absorber is going to be so that we can figure out where to put our source in the holder here. And so for aluminum, we have a rough idea that the absorption length, which is the distance where you would get 1 over E of the incident gamma radiation. So for aluminum, that's going to be on the order of 5 centimeters. So we've got a stack, which is roughly that. And we could just put the entire stack here and measure the total number of counts with and without the stack, but to avoid and to mitigate statistical uncertainty from your measurement, we will divide a stack into 4 pieces. And so we will measure this amount, then we'll measure this amount until we complete the stack. So the total stack will be this height, and we need to figure out where to put our holder. So we figured out that we can put the holder right here, and if we put the source in there, then that is far enough away that we could stick the entire stack. So this way, by doing it this way, we've brought our source as close as possible to the detector to do the measurement. So we'll go through the procedure just for aluminum, and you'll do the same procedure for lead. Now, lead is a much stronger absorber, so you will only need about 1 centimeter thickness for the lead. So you can take 2 of these pieces at a time and measure their thicknesses. So we know where the source is, and we will measure a stack. So we'll divide our stack of aluminum into 4 lengths, and then we want to measure the thickness of the stack. We will use a vernier caliper, which you might have forgotten how to use, or maybe you never did learn. So let me show you a little bit how to do that. So first of all, for 0 thickness, the 0 line here matches up with the 0 here. And then as I move the slide this way, I can use this 0 line and match it up here to get a thickness. So for example, if I were here, that would be exactly 1 centimeter. So the divisions here are in centimeter and 1/10 of a centimeter. So each one of these individual divisions is a millimeter. So let's go ahead and show you how to measure something with a vernier caliper. The way we do this is we put the caliper tight, and we see that the 0 line is matching up with the top line at about 1.4 something. Now, what is the something? That's determined by looking at where the vertical lines of the bottom scale match up best with the vertical lines of the top scale. And that appears to, at least for me, to look like it's around 8. So where that point is where the vertical lines match up, that is the next digit of the decimal. So this thickness is 1.48 centimeters. We are ready to take the measurements of the total counts. Notice that the sample here is farther away than what you did in labs 1 and 2. So we're going to have to count for a little bit longer time to get a decent count total. So this would be the 0 thickness measurement, which would be the number of counts for 5 minutes. I'm on a live time of 300 seconds, so I have set this thing to count for 5 minutes. And we will count the same amount of time for each measurement so that we can figure out what the intensity is. We're starting to measure. I've set this thing up at a coarse gain of 16 and a fine gain of 1. Here is the principal gamma peak, the 662 keV for cesium-137. Notice, as usual, I'm counting the whole spectrum. I don't really need any of this data here. I know where my gamma peak is at. I could just move these discriminators, lower and upper, to be here. Notice I'm no longer counting here. I'm only counting data in this region here. So you would do this for the preset time. It should stop at 300 seconds. And when it's done, you will measure the total number of counts in this peak. You will repeat the experiment, keeping everything fixed. You will put that stack of aluminum above the sample, and you will then measure for another 300 seconds, and then measure the total number of counts in this peak, and do that for each thickness of the absorber. So I would normally wait for the full 5 minutes here, but just for this particular demonstration, I'll stop it now. I've counted for 90 seconds, so I'll just go ahead and stop it and remind you how to measure the total number of counts. We just go in there and we set a region of interest, we click on it, and we get the gross counts and the net counts. The net counts in the peak are achieved by having the program subtract the background, so you could just use the net count as your number. So in this particular case, the total number of gamma rays that have entered our detector is the number of counts in this peak, and that's 14,939. So that would be your data point. For 0 thickness of aluminum, we measured 14,939 counts in the peak. You would then go and record those numbers, because you will plot them up later, and repeat the experiment with a certain thickness of aluminum. Let's stop this. And now we would put this stack of aluminum right on top and redo the measurements. We can already see that the number of counts that are being measured when I put that amount of aluminum on top is lower, and that's because many of them are getting absorbed. I can keep the region of interest fixed, and I'm just giving you an example here. I will stop it, and then in this case, I would measure a gross count of 3,851 and a net count of 3,322. So that would be your next data point. You would have, for a thickness of 1.48 centimeters, I measure a net count of 3,322. And you will do that until you complete the stack. And you will then have total counts measured over a 5-minute interval for 0 thickness and for 4 other thicknesses of aluminum. Okay? So now you do the same thing for lead. When you go to handle the lead, you should put on a latex glove, because the lead easily comes off the surface, and you don't want that on your fingers. So I've put on a glove, and this is the total thickness of lead that I will use, because it's a stronger absorber. So I will break this up into 2 or 3 segments and measure those thicknesses just as I did with the aluminum. And remember, when you are adding the amounts, you measure the thickness of the total amount. So I go from this thickness, which is maybe just 2 or 3 slabs, to this thickness, which is 4 or 5 slabs. I measure that, and then the total thickness, which would be all of these, and I would measure them exactly the same way that I did with the vernier caliper. Now, since this total thickness is lower than the aluminum, I can actually move my source closer to the top. So I'll move it into this slot, and then recognize that even the total thickness will give me enough room here. So we repeat the same experiment that we did with aluminum, we will do it with lead. Then the final part of this experiment is to use water. Now we're going to fill up this graduated cylinder with water. A previous student has already marked a few lines here, so you can fill up the water level to those lines. and you can read them right off here, 25.5 centimeters, 34 centimeters. And the absorption length of water is going to be longer than in either aluminum or lead, and so we have to measure at least one absorption length, and I won't tell you what it is, but it's somewhere between 5 and 30 centimeters. And we will then just fill this up with water. We'll start with 0 amount of water and then put it up to here, 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 and here. And in order to do that, we have to move our detector. We put it onto this ring stand, and we put this right over the water. We be sure to make this thing snug, and then we can drop this in to there. Now, we will put our sample at the bottom here, but the sample is going to be in water, and since our samples are plastic, they're going to float. And so we have to, for this experiment, we'll have to take our cesium-137 source, and if you want, you can actually stack 2 of these right on top of each other, but what we'll do is to put the cesium-137 source into this lead holder, and you can squeeze. Lead is soft, so we can squeeze it and just go ahead and then drop the lead, the source, into the bottom of the beaker. And according to Murphy's law, this thing will fall in such a way that the lead ends up that way. So you have to make sure that the source is visible down there. Okay, and we're ready to go. You will then do the same experiment. This will be the 0 thickness measurement, and again, you'll need a minimum of 5 minutes because you're pretty far away. So one option for this is to actually take another source container and get the cesium-137 from that one and put 2 of them down here, and then that will at least give you more counts. You might have to go more than 5 minutes. You will have to measure the counts here and make sure that you can get enough counts to measure the total number within that Gaussian-shaped peak. You will get total counts for 0 thickness, for this thickness of water, this here and here. And that would give you the same set of data for water. So you're done with the experiment now. You have the intensity, or the total number of counts in 5 minutes for different slab thicknesses of materials, whether it's lead or aluminum or water, and those are your data. And then the next part is the analysis, and I will discuss the analysis in class and also send you a handout for how to do that analysis. And that completes this lab.